Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the committee to order. This is the Reeves Subcommittee, Judiciary Non-Civil. It's 3 o'clock on, is today Tuesday or Wednesday? It's Tuesday. Tuesday afternoon. The first bill that we are going to hear is House Bill 236. Representative Yasmin Neal, if you want to come up and have a seat here. Okay, Representative Neal, your microphone should be live. So I know this is the second time that you have been before the committee. I was not here. I had to leave at the last one. My understanding is that a hearing was held. There's some discussion and that you have gone back and worked with several of the law enforcement agencies and have reached a consensus on some of the issues. So why don't you talk us through the bill, what changes were made, and tell us about your bill now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the committee for the second opportunity to come back. I would like to start with these corrections have been corrected based on recommendations from Georgia Sheriff's Association, Georgia Chiefs Associations, Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council. And I'll start there. So from the beginning, for the most part, this was language cleanup. So line 2, we added discretionary. Line 15, we changed Sheriff's Department to Sheriff's Offices. Line 16 through 20 is actually new. It's actually just clarifying language similar to what we had before. Upon obtaining a protective order under Code Section 1913.3, you can read there. It's just clarifying what we actually had before. Line 20, we're changing safety to such security checks. Line 23, we're adding security. Replacing safety that was there before. Line 26, we're adding security checks may include, and replacing safety checks must include. Line 27, we're adding observation of the exterior of the petitioner's residence, which is just clarifying language from what was there before. Line 28, we're adding officer presence in the vicinity of the petitioner's residence, clarifying the line that was there before. It said, go ahead.
What LC number are you working off of? LC 48 in the top right.
0404S.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the.
Oh, I see what the problem is. I'm reading the change list that the sheriff submitted, but I think
it's
the
based
line
on
number
okay, yeah. It's not. Yeah, the lines you're saying is not corresponding to the lines that we're seeing.
Perfect. So let me walk through. Let me start at line 23. So 23, we added such security that should be there in this draft. We think we need to add clarifying language. When it says checks shall occur, insert at least one time, continuing on at intervals and times in the discretion of the local law enforcement agency. We're adding that because right now.
Help me understand. So you're going to have you're asking for a proposed amendment.
Yes.
So you're, okay. So let's back up a little bit, just very briefly in like less than a minute.
Yeah.
Remind me what your bill does again, and just kind of, instead of technically going through the changes, explain to us in layman's terms.
Gotcha.
What's different about the bill now from the first time.
Understood. So the bill essentially is adding safety checks to for petitioners of restraining orders. That's the general basis of the bill. What the changes are essentially just language cleanup. Instead of saying riding through a neighborhood, it says something such as exactly. So before it said riding patrols to check the exterior of the petitioner's residence. The change by the Sheriff's Association was observation of the exterior of the petitioner's residence. So a lot of the changes are just language cleanup of saying one thing versus the other, but saying the exact same thing. And language clarification is actually most of this. The bill has not changed at its core. And that's about it.
So let me make sure that I understand this. This would require that if somebody obtains a TPO,
yes,
that is it upon their request that if they receive essentially kind of some patrol that the local, I guess it would be sheriff's department, would be obligated to send out patrol. Is that right?
Sheriff's Department or Police Department.
Okay. So it would be security checks and but there's no constraints on how many or how few, right? It would be
Right. But for clarifying language, that's why when I spoke to some individuals earlier, we
Mhm.
felt we might want to say just at least one, so it won't be misinterpreted to feel like they have to be there like every single day over the course of this 60 days. One time is good enough. And if they can do more, that's fine. And pardon me, to Representative Chairman Burchett's point, I was able to speak to Fulton County. They service 1.1 million individuals.
Mhm.
They actually currently do affect these types of security checks. So he said it would be no problem because they do it already.
And so, okay, does anybody in the committee have any questions or comments? Representative McLaurin.
Hi, Representative.
Yes.
Good to see you, and love the bill. I recall speaking with you offline about the importance of keeping these actions by police apart from the basic security check discretionary so that it doesn't create any sort of right to mandamus or any sort of relief that a person could use the courts to compel. And so it seems like as it's structured, it's going to avoid any types of issues like that.
Yeah.
But it also looks like it guarantees enough of a right to ensure that some sort of check happens. So it seems like the perfect compromise to me, and I appreciate that you've done so much work on it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I appreciate your input as well.
Representative Bodie.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to concur with my friend, colleague in the House Democratic Caucus that this is a good bill, good legislation. The gentlelady has worked very hard on this. I did reach out to my sheriff as well, Fulton County Sheriff Labat, and I think he's pretty much in favor of this. And I think it's just good bipartisan piece of legislation that we should move today out of committee.
Does anybody else have any questions for the author of the bill? Okay, so I have signed up to speak Mike Ayers from the GBI, Butch Ayers from the Georgia Chief Association. I don't think they're related. And then Terry Norris from the Sheriff's. Now, they're all in support of this, and they've all been, in my understanding, involved with helping you get to the language that we have today.
Verbatim.
So I'm not going to bring them in here unless anybody wants to hear from them. Representative Gravely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question. Listen, as the father of 3 daughters, I like the idea because you oftentimes hear a judge say that the TPO is not worth the paper it's written on. So I do want to make sure that these individuals are safe. I just want to make sure there's not a conflict in line 23 through 28, where it says what if you have a discrepancy here? Such security checks shall occur at intervals and times in the discretion of the local law enforcement agency and shall continue for the duration of the order. So when you say that just one time throughout that 60 days, it says that they're going to happen at intervals and times at the discretion of the local law enforcement, but that they shall continue for the duration of the order or until such request is withdrawn by the petitioner or the local law enforcement agency determines that the petitioner's circumstances no longer appear to require such security checks. If the petitioner and the local law enforcement agency disagree on, hey, the petitioner says, I think this needs to happen at least once a week, come by and check on me. But the local law enforcement agency says right here, as it's written in the bill, determines that the petitioner's circumstances no longer appear to require such a security check. Is this security check just a patrol through the neighborhood, or is it going up to the front door, knocking and making sure that the individual inside at that particular address is safe?
Yes, it is an exterior patrol that can consist of, yes, riding through the neighborhood. They can stop in front of the home. The language was suggested this way by the entities involved because we wanted to make sure that they can work these checks into their calls,
Uh-huh.
into their call volume. And
Yeah,
if they
it'll
can do
happen
it,
at certain time. Yeah, I'm
right,
sorry.
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm
So
sorry.
if they
I
can do it
interrupted you.
more than once, that's fantastic. If not, because of call volume and those types of
Okay.
things, this gives them that space to work that in.
Okay, that was the only question. I just want to make sure there was no conflict in
Mhm.
in section 2, where if the local law enforcement agency says, well, we deem the situation no longer, doesn't appear to be a requirement for such security checks.
Mhm.
However, the petitioner says, oh, yes, there should be.
Mhm.
So
Well-
you're going to have a conflict there.
Well, I think
That's all I'm thinking.
I understand. So from that perspective, like I mentioned, for instance, Fulton County, like they do these already,
Mhm.
and they're doing it out of good faith.
Yeah.
And I don't know of, and I respect your thoughts, but I think it's a conversation. I think when
Okay.
they're working through this, I think that is a part of the conversation with the agency and the petitioner saying, hey, how do you feel and what that looks like? I think it can be case by case. But at the bare minimum, we can institute that something happens automatically. But I think what you're talking about, I think it has to be a conversation between those two. And I do not believe the police would just brush off the concerns of that citizen.
Let me ask you this. And you alluded to your amendment about having at least one. Explain to me the context of that, because the way that it's written, I feel relatively comfortable with it the way that it's written, because I think it allows that discretion. And look, there are going to be, this is just how this works. There are going to be some people, victims, that obtain a TPO, and they're going to want a sheriff to patrol every hour of every day of,
Yeah.
they're going to insist on that.
Right.
And I think that we have to have the discretion of the agency to
Absolutely.
be able to differentiate between, what they can realistically do and what they can't.
Right.
Because I promise you, the second this becomes law, there will be folks out there that will want 24-hour surveillance based on
Right.
this, right? And
That's right.
And I think that we have to ensure that this doesn't turn into that.
Okay.
Putting
You see what I'm saying?
such security checks shall occur, at least you said something about it, at least once.
Well, in my opinion, I felt like I at the time, and if you read it the way I read it, then that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't misinterpreted. But if you're reading it the way I'm reading it, I don't need to put that in there.
I think that it actually, to me, might confuse it more by
Gotcha.
adding at least one time. I think that the way that it's written allows the law enforcement agency, and obviously they have a duty, they would have a duty with this and certain obligations, but within that duty, they need to be able to exercise discretion
Absolutely.
with that. And I think that this achieves that. I'm going to go to Representative Bodie.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And I definitely heard my friend, colleague, delegation mate. But I think, Mr. Chair, I think you might be spot on. I think line 23, when we utilize the word discretion, I think it kind of gives that discretion to law enforcement across the board as far as intervals and times. And I think I feel comfortable with it, but I do see Representative Vice Chair Gravely's concern, but I think just having the word discretion on line 23 covers us, I think.
Hey, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
It's a friendly question. I support the bill. I just want to make sure that section 2, we don't have a conflict, because in that section, you have a shall, you have a discretion, you have another shall for the duration of the order.
Do we need to change
Yeah, and-
shall to
Well, that's
No,
what I'm
I-
saying, for the
no.
duration of order, or until such request is withdrawn. if that request is not withdrawn,
60 days though. I believe that TPO is
Okay.
good for 60. So
yeah, for 60
the
days,
shall
though.
the shalls require two things. Number one, it requires a duration, which is 60 days, and it require that they do perform security checks at intervals. But then the frequency of those intervals would be within their discretion is
That
how
is, and I
how I
get
read
that 100%. I'm just saying, to your point, Mr. Chairman, when this becomes law,
Mhm.
and I absolutely believe, TPO, there's been some tragic things happen when somebody, a spouse or a female or whoever may be, has applied for and received a TPO and has still not remained protected. That's tragic.
Mhm.
So I like this.
Mhm.
I just want to make sure that when it becomes law, you don't have somebody with an expectation that every day they're going to have somebody coming through their neighborhood. And if the day they don't, they're going to start saying, well, the law says until I remove this request, or,
Mhm.
that's all I'm saying.
And I think Representative Gravely, that there will be
Okay.
people that interpret this as I get 24-hour security surveillance. But it's, such security checks shall occur at intervals and times in the discretion of the local law enforcement agency. And, and I think that our local law enforcement agencies have the training and experience to differentiate between, when something's an active threat and a passive threat and those kind of things. And I think that
And patrols their patrols in different areas, they'll probably have that address and they can
Right.
swing by.
Mhm.
Right.
That can work. I just want to make sure that just that section just kind of gave me a little pause.
you're
Not
no
enough to
longer
vote
talking
against
in the microphone.
it. That section gave me a little pause, but not enough to vote against it.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other comments or questions for the author? Chairman Burchett, what number are you?
Number 7.
So I share in what Vice Chair Gravely is saying. If it comes time, and I just want to put this out to the committee to see if we add after the word continue at the discretion of local law enforcement for the duration of the order, so that the shall that Vice Chair Gravely's talking about is also uses the boundaries of discretion for the local law enforcement agency? Or do you think that would be overkill, Chair?
I don't understand your question. Ask it again.
If we add after the word continue on line 24 at the discretion of local law enforcement for the duration, and then just let it read like it says.
Is your comment on, okay, McLaren?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. My only concern about that is that might circumvent the ultimate requirements for terminating the checks, because if you just say continue at the discretion of, to me that reads that the law enforcement agency has unfettered discretion to terminate. But what we're trying to do is say that there are circumstances under which termination is possible, which is until the request is withdrawn or there's a determination that the circumstances no longer require. So I would worry about putting in at the discretion of again, because I think it would sort of make obsolete those last two provisions. The only thing I was going to say in general is that I think the nuts and bolts of this are where do you want your mandamus action to fall? Because there's going to be a mandamus action if you say shall. And so I think that it's appropriate to have judicial relief where the law enforcement agency completely abdicates its duty to do checks at all. But anything past that, I don't know that we want a judicial remedy. So that's kind of what I meant earlier when I said I think that this appropriately balances the parts that are mandatory with the parts that are discretionary.
Representative Bodie.
And this is just a thought, and we don't have to move on it. Do you feel like, and I'm just asking this question, if we had a standalone section that just stated that any law enforcement decisions, as far as patrolling, anything is left in the discretion of that particular sheriff's department and or law enforcement department? If you had a standalone, that way anything that's dealing with decisions, patrolling, time, day is completely left in the discretion of law enforcement, and it's spelled out just a little bit more clear than it is in the lines that Vice Chairman Gravely have just stated, lines 23 through 28. If we had a standalone sentence.
So you're saying, so what you're suggesting is pulling out the discretion language of paragraph 2, maybe then creating a new paragraph 3,
Yes,
and allowing that paragraph to qualify everything in paragraph 2 with discretion.
exactly, Mr. Chair.
Representative Montahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just didn't know if maybe we had any inclination on what the Georgia Sheriff's Association and the folks there kind of felt. I know often we bring in GACTA and these others. I feel
They've all given their, we said at the very beginning of the hearing, they've all given their voice of approval. They've signed up to speak, but unless they need to speak, they won't. They all approve of the bill, and they were involved in the revisions.
okay, fantastic. Thank you.
And if I would, Mr. Chairman, this language this current language is actually verbatim from the Sheriff's Association.
So I think that I'll let McLaurin, I'll call on you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I mean, my concern would be if we make anything more specific in terms of shall, you cut too far into the discretion of the law enforcement agency. I know that the idea of at least one time is sort of a start at that, but to me, intervals and times it very clearly implies more than one. And I think too that if you're a law enforcement agency that's worried about compliance, you're not going to schedule just one drive-through. You're going to make a good faith effort at putting some sort of systematic review in place. I mean, maybe it's every 15 days, 10 days, whatever, but you'll find a way to do it. I guess this is one of those problems that's, you want to make sure it works, but any stronger medicine and you're kind of defeating the purpose of giving the law enforcement agency discretion. So I like it where it is. And with respect to my colleague from the Democratic Caucus, I don't necessarily think a separate section is necessary to address the issue, but I do think it's a legitimate concern. We want the bill to work, but we don't want to overreach.
Gravely.
Closing out on this, I would say, I would agree with you. There doesn't need to be any strong. I was actually saying withdraw a little bit, because you've got conflicts in paragraph 2 between the petitioner and law enforcement.
Tell me again, drill down on the conflicts.
Such security checks shall occur at intervals and times in the discretion of local law enforcement. Okay, so these checks are going to happen as they've got patrols out there at intervals and times that they can do it. All right. And shall continue for the duration of the order. So that's 60 days. This is shall do it. But at the end of that particular sentence, you're saying, or the local law enforcement agency determines that the petitioner's circumstances no longer appear to require such
Well,
security checks.
the way I read that, as long as they determine that it does require checks, and they're to continue, they're continue doing so. That last part of that sentence that would allow them to find that they're no longer required controls all of the before. Like, for example, if say, come in, Mr. Norris, if the person's moved and nobody lives there and the house is abandoned, then there would be.
That's a great point. But if I'm assuming the individual's going to be living there the entire 60 days. The individual is going to probably want a couple of times them coming out, and if she doesn't see them, or whoever doesn't see them for 2 weeks, and she's called and she's requested, hey, I feel like I need somebody here. I saw his truck drive by the other day, and the local law enforcement agency at their discretion says, man, we'll get somebody out there as soon as we can. I'm just saying there's just a lot of, I think it needs to be just very clearly defined. This is what a security check is. This is when we're going to be there. And this is how long we're going to do it for. That's all I'm saying.
Let's hear from Mr. Norris with the sheriffs. I know he was involved in this. Mr. Norris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Pull that microphone up closer to you so we can hear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also thank you, Representative Neal. We worked closely with this. There may have been a little bit of missing language in the translation, not much. Our intent was, and as well as Representative Neal was, to create a framework upon which plaintiffs in TPO cases could have some peace of mind by knowing that law enforcement in that residential area, their residents would have some sort of safety or security checks. And
Yes.
thank you for allowing those security checks. As you all know, our resources are limited, and the points that you all have made are very valid. People in these positions are oftentimes frightened, and they need the assurance of someone that they're going to be okay. Unfortunately, our resources, both at I'll speak for the chiefs as well, chiefs of police and the sheriffs as well, are limited, and would be very difficult to assume that we would be able to do something in a predetermined manner to make these folks feel well. So what the bill does, it allows the plaintiff to take the TPO to the local agency in the area in which they reside and simply say, I want security checks. Please provide those during the duration of the TPO. The manner in which those security checks occur, timing, otherwise, is and should be at the full discretion of that local agency. So whatever that means, if this language is confusing, then that would be our intent, to make that make those checks be delivered in a manner that is commensurate with the time and the resources and the ability and the needs of the plaintiff. Now, I will say this, there are some sheriff's offices and police departments that are already doing something similar to this. And if there ever is cause to believe that a particular plaintiff or victim is in greater peril than maybe normal, then that person would be able to talk to that law enforcement agency, and those patrols or whatever that might be agreed upon would occur at greater intervals. But we would not be comfortable with codifying the specific manner in which these security checks should occur.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, because
Yeah,
you hit the nail on the head.
Please.
I think you're exactly right. I agree with your opening statement was that when the petitioner comes and says, I've got this TPO, it's going to be good for 60 days. I'd like there to be kind of checkups. The office, department, or agency's response is 10-4 copy for the next 60 days. At our discretion, we're going to send patrols out there at our discretion and upon the development or use of resources. And I think that's all that needs to be said. Because after that, you've also got in here, or until such request is withdrawn by the petitioner or the local law enforcement agency determine. I mean, those are great to have. I just want to make sure that the expectations on both sides are very, very clear. That's all. And if y'all are good with it, I think we should move on and quit hashing it out. I was just saying, my thought was, I've dealt with this in my neighborhood. And there was a case of, there was a drug deal going on back in the neighborhood. I called my local sheriff's office. They sent somebody out there and they were great, prompt, everything was good. But the neighbor wanted somebody out there every week. And I just said, that just can't happen. So I just know the expectation of what certain people are going to think.
Chairman, if we just remove the until such petitioner request withdrawn or request is withdrawn from the petitioner, it seems to me the statute is laying out for the law enforcement office when they have to have these security checks. If we just remove until such request is withdrawn by the petitioner, wouldn't that just take care of the situation we're worried about? Because what we're worried about is when the petitioner is wanting to continue and law enforcement deems it not necessary.
Well, I think that the request has a 60-day shelf life on it, is the way I see it. The request has a 60-day shelf life, and if during the time of the 60 days, for whatever reason, the petitioner doesn't feel that they need that patrol anymore, probably what would normally happen is that whoever the petitioner had the TPO against, they probably made up and got back together, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
I mean,
a scenario.
we laugh to keep from crying around here, I swear. But I think that the the petitioner requesting it be withdrawn is a different concept than the local law enforcement agency determining that it's no longer, the circumstances are no longer there. I think those are two different things. I don't see a harm. I love to rewrite just about everything that I see in this committee, but I actually think that this,
Like I said, I'm good. We move forward.
how about this? We're at the point of session where we're running out of committee hearings, and I get the feeling that this committee is going to look favorably upon this bill. But what I would like to do, if with the permission of the chairman, is to go ahead and pass out as is. And if we need to huddle and look at a slight tweak before full committee, then I think that that's something that we could consider. I think this language lays out things in an adequate way, but if there's a better way to do it, then I'm open for consideration. But I don't know that I would want to do that in here, write it out on a napkin, as I'd like to say. I think that we should look at it and get input if we tried to rewrite any of it. I see.
Sounds good to me, Chair.
Mom to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, pass it to the committee. I think that Mr. Norris from the Sheriff Association may agree with me. I'm thinking about this bill in terms of my own local sheriff's department. I think we all do. And I think what we're trying to do here is extremely noble. Make no doubt. I agree with what you're trying to do as the father of two little girls, and I got a wife at home, and sometimes I'm out of town, and knowing that at some point, if one of them needed protection, I want them to have it. But I also kind of face the counterbalance, which is the fact that I know that our sheriff's department they're understaffed, they're underpaid, and underappreciated, really, just be honest. And so I find it kind of difficult for me, right, to put a requirement when I know that they're having trouble just responding to calls. Just sometimes the wait times come up to where it's unfeasible. Why should, and I'm not speaking just at this point, even for my own sheriff's department, but the staffing's low, right? You not a lot of interest in joining law enforcement today with all that we see on TV. And so I'm afraid if we continue to put these kinds of restrictions and force upon if we put the shalls in and we have all this, that we're going to end up tying these deputies' hands, right? And if we tie their hands, what else can they not respond to, right? With such a distance. That's my only concern, right? I'm trying to think about these sheriff's departments. I'm trying to think about these sheriffs, trying to think about these folks who put their life on the line every day, that are really overworked as it is, given the understaffing. And I'm just trying to bounce that out. And I don't know if anybody has any response to that. I'm not trying to be in a part of it. Just toss that to the committee.
Chairman or Representative Montahan, I will say that, we do have been involved in this process. It's been a collaborative process, and the sheriffs and the chief of police have both indicated that they're in support of this. And I think that if that wasn't the case, then I certainly, resources, there isn't a thing that we do up here that doesn't in some way get reduced down to resources, right? And funding and budget, et cetera. That being said, I think that with the groups that have indicated their support of this, I think that that's a less of my concern. And I think that the key is giving them that discretion. And if we're missing the mark on something, then there's still time. Time's running shorter, but there's still time to address it. But seeing the support that the bill has from those associations, I'm okay with that.
I had one last point.
Please.
Defer. Thank you. That is a growing concern, and I suppose I have trained you well on that matter as well. But the way the bill is written, it will not now fall strictly on the office of sheriff. it will be the local agency with the jurisdiction over that plaintiff's residence. So the way it's written now, the plaintiff can take that to the Atlanta Police Department, for instance, as opposed to the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, or the Pike County Sheriff's Office as opposed to Zebulon PD. So it gives some flexibility. It's written in a broad fashion. We do appreciate any thoughts you might have about any hard, firm mandates. And one last point. These security checks, as we have called them, can be no more than the routine patrol in that area where that deputy sheriff or that police officer might be anyway. So I think part of the unwritten message here is to the plaintiff in these cases where they might see an officer out there and they might think that that is the intent for them being in that area, while it might simply be a routine patrol. Is that fair? That's fair. So, and I think there's an underlying benefit there that we might not really capture specifically, but I think the benefit will be there. So our people are going to be fine with this, and thank you for that question. And I'm sure the PDs will as well.
Okay. Representative Gravely.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion, move to pass, knowing that if we do need to make a change, we can do that before full committee. Also knowing the support of the Sheriff's Association, Chiefs of Police, and the fact that the representative is a former law enforcement officer. I think we can, it's a good measure. I just want to make sure we get it right.
All right. So there's a motion and a second. Are there any amendments to, are there any amendments to the bill? Bodie, I know that your light's blinking. Do you have an amendment?
No, I was going to.
Okay.
I do have
Okay.
an amendment. The sheriffs would like to see line 17, shall, the word shall to may.
Upon granting a protective order under 1913.3 or 1913.4, the court may inquire with the petitioner whether she elects to receive periodic. So explain to me the difference between may and shall in that.
Well, that was language from the previous bill in which the court was to acquire or ask for and acquire the written requests for the security check. And then the clerk of court was to transmit those documents along with the TPO to at the time, the sheriff. So if there's no requirement for the court to do that further than that really is not a relevant point to me, whether they ask or not. So I was trying to help the courts by giving that permissive language.
Is there any discussion on the amendment of changing the shall to a may? Oh, that's right. Okay, so we've had a amendment that's been proposed by the author. Is there a motion on that amendment? All right, so there's been a motion to approve by the chair. There's a second. Is anybody, does anybody object to the amendment by the author? Seeing none, are there any further amendments to the bill? All right, seeing none, there's a motion to pass LC 480404S as amended by committee. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, your bill will go on a full committee, and at some point huddle up and make sure that if there's any changes that if we need to iron any of these things out, then we can do it in full committee. So,
And I can circle back on what date that'll be. Thank you, sir. Thank you to the committee. I appreciate it.
okay. Yeah, okay. All right. So Representative Montahan, we're going to call House Bill 327. And can I go ahead and get John Watson and Thomas Busey to come in here and have a seat? John Watson and Thomas Busey, come on in. Is John Watson here or no?
He is out there.
John Watson, can you please come into 132? Y'all can both. Yeah, you can sit back there. That's fine. Okay, so we're on House Bill 327. I believe it's LC 280056. Is that correct? Is that right?
We'll restate the LC number.
280056.
That's right. LC 280056. Yes, sir.
Okay, so here is what we're going to do. There has been, this has been for the
Which
second
LC
year in a
number you
row.
got?
Can I see your copy of
Okay.
the-
Which one?
Can I see a copy of the sub?
Sure.
Sorry. Mr.
So for the second year in a row, this bill has actually been taken up more, it's taken the majority of the time of this subcommittee for 2 years in a row. Interestingly, it's different parts of the bill each year, but
Mm-mm. I believe it should be. Yeah, well, I've written on it.
so can somebody tell me what's happened?
With that, the sub that you have in the folders isn't the sub that we discussed last subcommittee meeting. Which would be LC 280249S.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'm going to suspend on 327 until we get the sub done, and I'm going to get started on Holcomb's bill. If 327 comes back, don't go far. If 327 comes back and we're in the middle of something that's going to take a while with Holcomb's bill, then we'll suspend on Holcomb. So Holcomb, you come up here right now. Watson and Thomas, y'all can just stay in the back if you want. Okay, so have a seat, Representative Holcomb. Thank you for your patience. You've been very patient both times we've heard this bill. Walk us through very quickly what your bill does and the changes from last time. And I want to go ahead and prime the committee. There's a potentially small fiscal impact that this bill could have. That fiscal note has been requested. We anticipate that the fiscal note is going to be back by Monday, which is crossover day. So we will have had the chance to observe the fiscal note sometime between now and then. And so what I want to do today, so that we don't run out of time while we're waiting on a fiscal note, is go ahead and move this bill, and then we'll continue to wait on that fiscal note and get in the posture where then it would be prepared to go to rules if the full committee decides to move the bill on. And so we don't have the fiscal note. I think it's going to be between $35,000 and $40,000 is the anticipated amount. So it's a very small fiscal note. Representative Holcomb, tell us about your bill and tell us about the changes from last time to this time.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Reeves. We're working off of LC 280282S, and the first thing that you'll notice is that it's smaller. And working from the back, we cut out section 6, which dealt with the SANE nurses. We're still working through that. And then we cut out section 7 through 9, which had to deal with addressing sexual assault of doctors and patients. The reason for the latter is because we passed already House Bill 458, which added a lot of that text into it. So now let me start from the beginning. The bill seeks to address a few reforms that were all recommended by the state's expert committee on sexual assault. I've been a member of that committee for about 5 years. So section 2, what this does is each judicial circuit is supposed to have a sexual assault protocol. Not all of them do. So the idea here is to have a reporting requirement of annual compliance to ensure that every jurisdiction that is by law required to have a sexual assault protocol actually does. Section 3 is an adjustment of language relating to victims who choose not to immediately report. It's largely an issue of syntax, but one that matters because the language had the phrasing of does not cooperate with law enforcement, which was viewed to be negative with respect to victims. So the language has been changed to be more direct, and it states that the victim chooses not to report the alleged sexual assault to law enforcement at the time of evidence collection. The law enforcement agency with jurisdiction shall maintain any physical evidence collected as a result. And we're not changing any of the other standards for unreported kits. Candidly, to the committee, this is a hard issue, and it's one that we're still grappling with in terms of bigger policy discussions. So we're not wading into that. We're just making a slight change that's been requested by victims' rights advocates and survivors. The meat of the bill is in section 4. And what this would do is to set up a sexual assault tracking system. The idea is akin to what we experience in our everyday lives with the ability to track certain things. Is this would give victims of sexual assault the ability to track a kit from the time of evidence collection all the way through, hopefully, to prosecution.
And this is going to be handled by the CJCC.
Exactly. It'll be handled by the CJCC, and I'll point out just a couple of highlights. One is if passed, then CJCC would immediately get to work, and you'll see that on lines 67 and 69 on page 4, CJCC would provide a plan for phased implementation of the sexual assault kit tracking system to the General Assembly by the beginning of next year. And then they'll roll it out and also give us reports. And I think one of the benefits of this is once we have the tracking system, we'll have greater granularity in terms of just overall numbers. So maybe we could perhaps have interventions to reduce the rate of overall violence to begin with. So that's the biggest part of the bill now. And then section 5 is a coordination mechanism with the FBI on its Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, also known as VICAP. VICAP are the worst of the worst crimes, like truly. They are the serial murderers, the serial rapists. So the idea here is to have coordination between our law enforcement agencies with the FBI to try to solve these hardest to solve crimes. Some of our jurisdictions are already doing this, but this would make it a mandatory, and I think also provide the benefit of just raising the issue. So all of our law enforcement agencies would know about this database and then have information sharing, again, with the goal of trying to solve these crimes. And this language has been reviewed by the FBI, and they're comfortable with where it is. And it's also been reviewed by the defense lawyers. And I made a number of changes at their request to include a process for an individual to have his or her information removed from the database if requested. And that's on page 6 and page 7.
So I trust you've worked with CJCC on this.
From the beginning.
Did they have any concerns about the current draft of the bill?
No.
Has
they
any
support
other law enforcement agencies that would be involved in this expressed any concern or any associations? Have you gotten any pushback from anyone?
I have not heard any concerns. And
what would the appropriation be for?
So the appropriation, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The appropriation would be for the sexual assault kit tracking system. It will be a website. Right now, Georgia has grant monies to pay for the website. There is some hope / expectation that grant monies would continue for the website, but I have asked the question in the event that the grant is not available to maintain the system long-term, what is the estimated cost? And I've been told it was $36,000 roughly on an annual basis, which I think is a smart investment, and because it will be a statewide system that victims across the state could use and access. We'll see if the fiscal note is consistent with that, but that's what I've been told.
And so your position right now is that there's grant money that would cover all of the costs of this. And so that even though we need a fiscal note for all the checks and balances that we do here, if a grant were to provide for that, then that appropriation wouldn't even need to be used. Is that right?
Correct. At least to launch it. That's correct.
And so you're talking about a initial cost to launch it, and then there would be a some kind of nominal maintenance fee that would go. And who exactly would maintain and who would control this website? Is this CJCC?
It's the language is left flexible. It could be CJCC or it could be a private vendor. I know that they are pretty far along in having those discussions, and I could certainly get more granular level detail on that. But they will be the oversight agency to run it and to manage the contract if they outsource.
Sure. Yeah. So they either run it internally or they outsource it to a private vendor.
Correct.
Does anybody have any questions for Representative Holcomb on his bill? I do not see any. So at the appropriate time, is there a motion? Bodie,
Motion do pass.
is there a second? Okay, there's a motion and a second on the bill. Are there any amendments to the bill? Seeing none, the underlying motion to do pass LC 28028S. All those in favor state by saying aye. All opposed? Okay, your bill passes. Before you leave, thank you for your continued work on sexual assault. You've been an incredible champion for that here. And Georgia is a much better place because of the work that you've done on this issue for about 5 or 6 years now. And I appreciate it. And I also want the record to reflect that Representative Holcomb and I are in the same leadership Georgia class. And we are the best class ever. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
See you in full committee. Yeah, if you can hang around today.
Thank you.
Okay, now we are back. We're unsuspending on House Bill 327. Do we have a new LC? They're printing. Okay. Okay.
I'm just trying to help.
I almost needed you to second something just now. I don't know if
I was waiting for the phantom.
Do we?
I saw it though. You raised the hand.
Oh, let's not even bring that up before this bill comes out.
Okay. All right, we are back on 327, and we should all be looking at LC 280249S. Thank you, Mr. Busey and Mr. Watson, for being here. Before we get started, there's several things that I want to say. This issue, again, as I said earlier, this bill for the second year in a row was the bill that certainly took up the most time of this committee, and it was for a good reason, because we were asked to consider a very, very important and frankly needed a problem that needs a solution. And part of our job in the state of Georgia is to protect Georgians from consumer fraud, also to try to protect our retail institutions that we have some absolutely fantastic and amazing Georgia companies that are based in Georgia, like Home Depot and many others that literally, see millions and millions of dollars of inventory go out the door each year from theft. And, now as we live in the age of the internet, those items that product is moved online through sinister means. And part of what we have to do as lawmakers is figure out how to address these issues. And I believe wholeheartedly that that an issue of great virtue was brought before us, and a very bold and aggressive solution was brought to us. But I think that this committee has wrestled with this, and I have required the attention of this committee on this issue, unlike any other issue we've taken up this session. And the committee has responded and given this issue the attention that it needs and deserves. But we are not at a place where we feel like we can grasp the sweeping nature of what we're dealing with here. And there are still a lot of questions that we don't have answers to. There are still some questions that we are receiving conflicting answers on. And when it comes to the idea, and I am not very smart when it comes to this whole computer world stuff, but when it comes to the idea of what it means to regulate the internet, and what we bite off when we take a bite of that apple, what does it mean? And I don't know. And I like just about probably everybody else out there in some form or fashion, am very frustrated with the pace that Congress in Washington, D.C. seems to address a lot of issues. This is an issue that our federal government needs to address, because the issue affects all 50 states in the same way. And it's not that me saying that here, sitting here right now to this microphone, is going to cause that to happen. And I think that we all know that Washington, D.C. is very focused on a lot of other things right now than this. But I don't know that I am comfortable that I'm in a place as a state lawmaker to be ready to take the step of this when I'm not sure that I can see the reach of how far it will go and what it will require. And so I am very thankful that the issue was brought before us. I am extremely thankful, Mr. Busey, especially for you, with the work that you have done. You have worked extraordinarily hard on this issue, and I understand that from the retail perspective and from the consumer protection perspective, there's a lot of pressure to get something done here, and it should be that way, because we should be tasked with protecting our consumers. But every now and then an issue reaches us, and we have such a limited time here. And I don't think anybody wants this to be a full-time legislature. This is the kind of thing that if we were full-time, we might be able to figure out a way to address this. And what I am committed to doing is, over the next year, figuring out if there is something within this that can rise up, that we can create better accountability with online marketplace, with the online marketplace entities, and all of the commerce that goes on there. We know this is how we do business now, and these marketplaces make a lot of money doing this, and some of them do a fantastic job of offering consumer protection means. Some of them don't so much do a fantastic job. There's the potential for fraud is absolutely prevalent in this, like unlike anything I've ever seen. And I will say, as we started this hearing from the beginning, I have asked for help. I've asked for guidance. I've asked for solutions from the folks that have been opposed to this bill. And I have to be frank, I haven't received those. And I am hopeful that as we move forward out of this session, we continue to review this issue for the next year, that I am hopeful that the folks that have an interest in this, that are on the different side of this than you are, Mr. Busey, will in good faith engage with us and figure out a way. It is, whatever the other 49 states do is to a degree their business, unless the federal government tells them otherwise. But if there's a way that Georgia can crack this nut, then I want to see us do that. And I want to see us get to something like that. And I'm giving notice right now as I speak into this microphone that my expectation is that all of the players that all the stakeholders in this issue are going to come to the table and negotiate in good faith and bring forth ideas so that we can come up with that. Because I don't think it's asking too much. The information that we would require that the marketplace, that the sellers give and the marketplaces require that they receive, and then that information be given. I don't think that that's asking too much. I really don't. I don't understand how much the verification would cost. We never really got an answer on that. I don't think the information that we're asking for is too much, but the question mark I have is, if we regulate the internet on, internet commerce in Georgia on this, how far reaching does that go? And even though you did everything we asked you to do, and you helped get us closer to language that took out some of the smaller, the art, the Etsy, category. You did everything that we asked you to do. I don't feel that we got any input really of that was productive or in constructive input from the other side. And I insist that as we analyze this moving forward, that there's going to be an accountability, that we're going to come together and figure out how Georgia can solve this problem in a way that's going to make sense. And again, that is my expectation moving forward. And so I appreciate good work. I think everybody on this committee and everybody in this house appreciates good work. And I appreciate what you did and what the folks that were working with you did on this. And I think you've raised an issue that is a valid issue. It is full of virtue. And I thank you for that. And I just can't get to this place where I feel like we have reached what we need to do. And that's a horrible feeling, because I want to get there, because I want to solve this problem, but I don't feel we've gotten there yet. That's the longest that I've ever spent introducing somebody else's bill. But I wanted to say that. I wanted to put all that out there on the record, because I think this is important. This issue is a little bit different than anything that we've been dealing with this session. It's probably not as much in the quote criminal context as it is the technology context, but it makes the issue nonetheless, it's just as worthy of an issue for the minds on this committee to take up. And I think I speak for everybody on this committee that we've all learned a lot, and we all acknowledge that there's a problem, but we need the right solution. And that's something that we're going to have to work towards. So thank you for that. And with that, what we're intending to do is to strike Section 3 from this bill. And Representative Montahan is going to move forward on his underlying bill, which is the same bill that this committee and the House of Representatives passed last year, dealing with a different aspect of retail fraud. And I believe that there are a couple of changes from last year. In the interest of time, my hope is that we can get through this quickly, since this committee vetted this bill with extraordinary detail last year. With that, Representative Montahan, why don't you, or Mr. Busey, if you want to quickly remind us what the underlying bill does.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that prelude to this bill. We certainly appreciate that. This is a bill that we have been bringing to this committee for the past 2 years. But I will say, with that kind of introduction, as a child, I used to watch Monday Night Raw, a wrestling program for y'all that remember. And sometimes it's the introduction that's the best part. And so I would say that for this committee, that was the best part. Beyond that, I want to thank the Georgia retailers, Target, Walmart, Home Depot, and those folks for bringing this, information to us so that we can tackle this issue. We recognize your investment in our state, the commerce that you bring, and the level of convenience you bring to our Georgia consumers. And to Amazon and eBay, we also appreciate your investment in our state. and the convenience that you bring to Georgia consumers. And so we certainly appreciate each and every one of you, which is why this is such a tough bill, because we're not here to pick winners and losers. We're here to make sure that consumers are getting the right kinds of goods. And we're also here to make sure that that we're making as level of a playing field as is possible through the law. And so, again, just appreciate y'all for that. With that, we are going to be striking Section 3 of the bill, which was probably the most kind of nerve-wracking part that we've been working through effectively, which was the online marketplace restrictions and qualifications and requirements and all that. With that same thing, as the chairman has stated, with the understanding that that's coming down the tracks. And so while it may not make it in this version today, it is the intent that we bring that information back in and consider how we can regulate this in a meaningful way. For the sake of time, I'm going to briefly go through what this underlying bill does. In fact, it may be better. I think this may be the 7th, 8th, or 9th rendition of the bill, with minor changes from the folks over at Georgia Retail Association. And I'm going to let them actually speak to some of the changes that they wanted in the bill. So
I think that's great. Mr. Beasley, can you give us a 30,000 foot and then talk about the differences between
Absolutely.
this year and last year?
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Monahan. And, do you mind if I remove this? Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Do you mind if I remove this?
No, I don't care. That's fine.
Thank you, Representative Monahan. Thank you, Chairman Reeves, for the introduction and for the hearing of the issue. And in the sake of time, I will say first that while Section 3 may be removed from the bill, we still believe that it is good policy. We look forward to having those conversations with you, with the legislature, and with the other stakeholders to find a place where we can protect Georgia consumers and retail businesses. That being said, what this bill does, it is fundamentally the language that will remain is fundamentally unchanged in what it does from House Bill 488 of last year, which I believe everyone, but I think Chairman Burchett was a part of those conversations as well.
He was.
So I'll just go through it section by section. We can talk about what it does and what the changes are. Section 2 is the gift card registry for individuals selling gift cards on the secondary market. This is where the most substantive change took place. And that change was to further define the chain of possession in what we're after. While we were happy with last year, we think that this is an improvement. It makes it less nebulous in who we're actually talking about. So much like last year, a corporate issuer is a company that issues the card, but that was also altered to include any affiliate in that family of cards. So a Gap card could be used at an Old Navy because they're the same brand. It contemplates that. A corporate authorized reseller would be another merchant selling a corporate issuer's card. So it would be the same as if you were at a Walgreens buying a closed loop Chili's card. That remains very, very similar from last year. A corporate issuer agent, and this was brought by one of our members by their vendor that works in this space, is a marketing level vendor who is authorized to sell gift cards on behalf of multiple merchants. So a retailer may contract with a company like Blackhawk, which is the name of one that sells and markets closed loop gift cards on behalf of a plethora of merchants. And they sell them to individual retailers. So think of it as someone is walking around with a briefcase full of different cards that they're authorized to sell, going to that end use merchant, letting them decide which cards they want to sell. It's all about who is authorized in the chain of possession.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Can you pull your microphone up, buddy?
Sorry, Mr. Well, now I'm following you, but I just want to make sure what's the big difference, because it sounds like Walgreens is kind of doing the same thing. Is it because we got a corporate entity making the sale of the gift cards as opposed to an individual? Is that the big difference?
I think we're getting to your
Oh, okay.
to your question. These are all the folks that are authorized in that chain of who's allowed to market the gift cards on the company level. When you're talking about what we addressed last year, how gift cards are utilized to affect organized retail crime and refund fraud, when that person converts that stolen merchandise into a gift card that they then sell to a merchant, when they sell it, it becomes a third-party card. And they sell it to a third-party card dealer. In last year's bill, we just had that as merchants. This is more specific. So we're making sure that we're not capturing individual to individual transactions, and we're capturing the people that we intend. I know it's a little more legalese, but we felt that that was important to further define the terms in the bill. Another change there in that section, which I believe begins on line 48. Last year, it was a permanent record book, right? We've changed it to a permanent record and allowed on line 59 the ability for these third-party card dealers to utilize an electronic means of recording if they so choose. They can still keep a permanent record book if they want. They can still keep a handwritten record, but they can utilize other services like Leads Online to record this if they want to. So it provides some modernization and flexibility to the folks that would have to record this information.
And this is directed at pawn shops? Is that right?
No, this is directed in third-party merchants that act like pawn shops.
Okay.
We already required this recording
That's right,
information
that's
on
right.
behalf of pawn shops. And that is really the only substantive change in that section. Then section 3 no longer being with us. In section 4, we changed the definition of retail property in the retail property fencing statute to comprehend all articles in commerce instead of just new articles in commerce, which I believe Chairman Reeves was a change of yours. In section 4-2 and 4-3, this was originally brought by the Clayton County DA, I believe when she was the Clayton County Solicitor General, to Representative Burnell.
That's right. We added this in from Representative Burnow's bill, which
Correct.
deals with when you have serial shoplifters sometimes who have their 10th shoplifting, but they keep getting they plead nolo, et cetera, and they don't get bumped up to felony status even though they're a serial shoplifter. What we did was two things. We made it where a plea of nolo would count as a regular conviction, but with that, with a fourth conviction, the law as is written right now requires a mandatory minimum of 1 year. But we added in lines 241 through 244 what I refer to as the cushion language that allows the state and the defense to agree to deviate from that. And that is right. This came over to the bill from Representative Burnell's bill.
Yes, sir. With the improved language, that has not changed from last year in section 4.1, hasn't changed from last year. Section 4.4, which creates the offense of organized retail crime, which allows for greater flexibility in pursuing shot callers of retail crime rings. That was changed, and it was an improved change. And I'd like to thank Representative McLaurin for pointing that out to me to correct a split infinitive. It was an oversight from last year. In line 263, last year's bill read or deprives the owner. We changed it to or to deprive the owner to make this crime and this penalty count for what it's supposed to count for and not open it up to abuse. Those are the changes from last year, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Does anybody have any questions? Our poet laureate, non-voting member, McLaurin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to reciprocate the thanks despite my obstinate, partisan, baseless opposition to the bill and crime that you worked with me on it to, tighten the language a little bit.
Absolutely, Representative. Absolutely.
Can't handle it over here. Thank you, Mr. Busey. I appreciate it a lot.
Anybody have any questions? Representative Montahan.
Mr. Chairman, if I may posit just to the committee, I want to give everyone here and everyone who's on the committee last year a great deal of thanks for hearing this issue so many times. You've been so good to us, Mr. Chairman. So thank everybody for all your help, all the input on both sides. This is where we've seen bipartisanship work, and I appreciate that.
Bodie.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say the same. We appreciate the Retailers Association, Home Depot, coming together. I mean, we had a marathon hearing last week, but I'm glad we came to a place where we can actually get the bill moved. And thank the sponsor as well and the chair for making this happen today.
You're welcome. This is, I mean, seriously, 2 years in a row. Gravely.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would never miss an opportunity. I just want to thank everybody in the room as well, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank everybody for being here. That's what Tom.
We are having this incredible moment of kumbaya. I don't want it to end, but I absolutely want it to end. Is there a motion?
Well, Mr. Chairman, because of the sub and the way that it's constructed, I believe the committee would have to adopt the sub, not motion to pass. The committee would have to move to adopt the sub, then amend
That's
section
right.
3 out of the bill, then
That's right.
pass the sub as amended.
Is there a motion to adopt the sub LC 280249S? There's a motion to adopt. Is there a second? Is there any objection? Okay, so we have moved to adopt the sub. Is there a motion to pass on the sub? There's a motion and there's a second. Are there any amendments? I would like to propose an amendment that we strike lines 83 through lines 223 in its entirety. And in addition to that, line 224, part 4 will now read part 3. Line 225 will read section 3.1. Line 231 will read section 3.2. Line 245 will read section 3-3. Line 257 will read section 3-4. And then line 279 would read part 4. And then line 280 would read 4-1. Can I get a motion on my amendment? Yeah, let me see. Give me 1 second, y'all. Okay, so then finally, in the Reeves amendment, in lines 4 through 6, we would strike to provide for certain record keeping and reporting requirements for the sale of goods by third-party sellers on online marketplaces, semicolon, to provide for penalties for failure to comply, semicolon, to provide for confidentiality, semicolon. Strike all of those things since we're striking section 3. Is there a motion on my amendment? Is there a second? Is there any discussion on the Reeves amendment? Seeing none, we are now the underlying vote on a motion to pass on the amended committee substitute to LC 280249S. I think I just said that right. All in favor of the bill, please vote. Like McLaurin.
Mr. Chair, I just want to say for the record, we should not create a 3 to 20 felony if big corporations could change their receipt policy to obviate the harm. That's the only thing I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And all those in favor of the motion to pass, please vote by saying aye. All opposed? Okay, the bill passes and goes on to full committee. And are we, Chairman Burchett, are we going to try to hear this? No. Okay, we're going to get this fixed before it goes to full. All right.
Amazon heard what you said and is responding to your charge as we speak.
Great. Thank you. And thank you. And please have them follow up with me and with Representative Montahan.
We've heard
Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, Representative Gullett, you win the patience award for today. Where's the sign up sheet on this? God. Shit. Okay. Okay, Representative Gullett, can you why don't you walk us through where we are? We've heard your bill. We know there's a lot of work that was done behind the scenes and a lot of discussion. Can you talk us through where we are now, what your bill does, what's changed from the last time that we were here? Yeah, we're LC 413060S.
That's right. Is that right, LC? Fortunately, I've already ran out of my drink. So we'll give this the go. Yeah, LC 41306S. We've done a good bit of work since the last time we testified. I don't even know what version we testified to, if it was original bill, if it was a substitute at the time, to be honest with you. But a couple of the changes I want to go through that I know weren't there the last time we talked. One is that the makeup of the members, first off. So there's two panels.
And here's what I'm going to do, Representative Gullett.
Sure.
Can I get Shannon Wallace and Rebecca Grist to go ahead and come in? Since there's hardly anybody in the room right now, I would like it if the two of you could just come in here in the hearing room. And y'all can maybe sit on the back tables in front of a microphone. Okay, great. Okay, I'm sorry, Representative Gullett, continue
You're
on.
good. So one of the first things that we did was the makeup of the members of the two panels. So we have a hearing panel and we have an investigative panel.
Tell us where you are in the bill.
Yep, sorry. So on the line 21, or really line 20, consists of 8 members. 21 is there's a 5-member investigative panel and a 3-member hearing panel. What we changed was the makeup of those members. So this hasn't changed really outside of line 37. Well, let me get the substitute. I'm looking at the original. Sorry. So line 24 was investigative panel. The authorization of hearing panel, which was line 33, shall be responsible for. We talk about the standards for which they are subsection H. And so any standards shall elaborate, define, and provide context for grounds of discipline as set forth in section H. That's a modification of language slightly. Talking about the discipline and guidelines really related to H. I think we called them canons before, and that's a problem. The makeup of the different members. So the 5-panel member of
Tell us what line. You gotta
Sorry, I know.
constantly tell us the line.
Yeah, I got you. So line 49 still says the PAC may recommend the respective appointing authorities. And then line 52 talks about the 5 members of the investigative panel. This version still has a district attorney by the governor, which is line 54, solicitor general by line 57 by lieutenant governor. And then line 60, we've changed the makeup. So it says 2 practicing attorneys shall be appointed by the Speaker of the House of Representatives to each serve 4 years. And we've added additional language to stagger amongst all of them to stagger the terms, so we don't have a complete refresh of the panels. And then also line 67 was 1 practicing attorney with at least 5 years experience as a prosecutor, but not currently a prosecutor by the Senate Committee on Assignments. That actually should not be correct. It should be, we'll need an amendment, basically a practicing attorney, the same as line 60, but it will be appointed by the Senate Committee on Assignments.
So it's taken away the requirement that they have 5 years of
That's
prosecution experience.
That's right. And then the 3-member panel, which is 74, line 74, that's related to the hearing panel. That has not changed. Initially it did not change. So 1 citizen member still by the governor. Line 77, 1 district attorney by the full vote of the Senate. And then line 81 did change. Before we had a senior judge. Line 81, 1 senior judge. A senior judge is someone who has 10 years experience in Superior Court, and they still occasionally hear cases. What we've changed that from a senior judge is to one former judge of the Superior Court or Court of Appeals or former justice who has 10 years experience as a judge. So it's really a retired judge versus someone who occasionally hears cases as a senior judge. Another change that we made was line 86. All members' initial term shall begin on April 1st. That was the same, but we've given a longer term for them to create the rules. We've given them a year to write the rules. So shall begin on, and so starts, they start in April, but then from a funding mechanism, we say they shall begin on July 1st, 2022. From this, and then later on in the back of the bill, we talk about how they have that full year to write the rules, and I'll talk about that in a second. Commission member. So there was also a call out related to worried about membership of, or not, I'm sorry, shopping of a district attorney from someone on the commission, and we removed that. That was previously section N, and we removed that language as well. One big piece I want to call out that was later in the bill was the actual guidelines, and that is section H, which is line 141. Prior to, we had 3 different guidelines. We've adjusted that.
Where did you get these? So you've got, I see.
We have 7. We have 8. 7 plus 1 with the bar. So 7. This came from North Carolina. I think at the I can't remember if it was an actual committee hearing or that we had, or if someone had sent it to me. But North Carolina has statute on how to remove a district attorney, and so we pulled that specific to district attorney because I believe a lot of the concern was that the 3 items were too vague and they weren't necessarily specific to district attorneys. This is in the role that they play. So these came from the North Carolina statute. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then and 7, and then number 8 actually just recognizes the role that the state bar has with Rule 3.8 and the Georgia Rules of Professional Conduct. So that's really the 8th one. So we went from 3 more vague to 8 more specific guidelines for the committee. Also, we did change that we recognize really is section N now, I believe. Well, section M, I'll start 206. Commission shall commence by April 1st, 2022, and the rules and regs promulgated by the commission shall be established no later than April 1st, 2023. So that's what I was talking about earlier. They have a year to write the rules. And
So this wouldn't actually. So they would have until April 1st, 2022 to have their commission identified and
the members appointed.
And then they would have a year to have their rules drafted and approved, and which it requires approval by the Supreme Court. Is that right?
That's right. And then lastly, I think is in section N, authority of the commission shall be limited to the discipline regarding conduct of a district attorney, solicitor general as an office holder. And then nothing in this code shall be construed as diminishing the authority of Supreme Court and State Bar of Georgia to regulate practice of law in the state. So I think that's an important call out to say, recognize that the bar and the Supreme Court both have a role with practicing attorneys in Georgia, and this commission is not solely over district attorneys.
Okay. Remind me again, what is it that what's the triggering event that would cause this commission to gather? Would it be a report or a complaint?
That's
And
correct.
how are those complaints submitted?
Yeah, so and we talk about that specifically in the bill. So to get to the line, I'm sorry. Yeah, you actually make a complaint to a committee member.
Commission member?
I'm sorry, commission member, and it's really the executive director of the commission. So each member's, I'll get there, I'm sorry.
So is the executive director of this is that a full-time job, or is that a person within the commission?
No, that would be a full, that's not staff. So the commission actually, they choose their chair. So the investigative panel would elect their chair and vice chair. And then the hearing panel, the district attorney appointee would be the chair, but the executive director will be staff for the commission.
Would that be the only employee of this agency or entity?
So I don't know. It was really up to the commission to decide that. I think from the fiscal note, I think that they had more than that, but just because of the amount of cases that they could hear.
Okay.
And I'm still going through your answer.
And so would a complaint go through so the complaint would be submitted to the executive director of this commission, and then that executive director, based on the complaint, would then set a notice and do whatever would be required to get the information to the commission members and the investigative panel so that they can do their diligence. And then if a hearing is necessary, then would do the same for the hearing. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep. And they would pass on their report to the hearing panel for a hearing. Yeah. After service of filings, see.
One of the things I remember from the first hearing we had on this was that we had some concern about, I think H had a 1 and a 2 and a 3, and they were looked at as potentially, could potentially include just about anything you could fit in it. And so tell me where we are with H now. Is this in your mind a more direct?
Yeah, it's very specific. That's what I talked about from the North Carolina statute. I think that was one of the biggest complaints, and I think it was a recommendation of that hearing. Hey, I think North Carolina has something that you could possibly utilize. Might have been one of the speakers at the last hearing gave us that, and that's what we referred to as they have a statute. They are specific to district attorneys and removal of district attorneys.
What about with respect to the JQC in Georgia? Is there a list in code and statute that the JQC kind of derives its rules and regulations from, or is it all determined by the JQC?
I don't know. I don't. I think that there is a code of conduct or something like that for that already established for judges today, and I think that's what the JQC. But I can't speak to JQC.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna Representative Bodie.
Mr. Chair, thank you so much. I think your inquiry is along the lines of mine, like line 145, willful misconduct in office. I kind of want to know who's going to make, like, how is that defined? What constitutes willful misconduct in office? Also, line 149 through 150, the conduct, that language, administration of justice brings into office in disrepute. Like I don't know how we would define that. And that's critical, because if that's a mechanism to be disciplined by this commission, we would need some type of adequate, I would say, definition on what's in bounds, what's out of bounds. I'm just trying to figure through that. And I understand it's model language from North Carolina. So has North Carolina defined that action somewhere so both the DA, solicitors, and the commission would know how to regulate? Because I'm struggling with that, Mr. Chair, and I have a question mark all over the place. So I'm really concerned about that, because I want to make sure everyone knows if they're in the bounds and then they know when they're out of bounds.
Chairman Burchett.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to respond if possible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we need to define willful, and it's a term of art. I believe it's both voluntary and intentional. So I don't know how much more we want to delve into what willful means. It comes up pretty much within our practice often.
Good. So can I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind. Mr. Chair, I agree. The only thing I'm concerned about is willful misconduct. Is it legal, illegal? But I'm more so concerned with line 149 through 150. I understand where Mr. Chair has come from. You might be absolutely correct but 149 and 150 is a lot more vague. And I would agree to 145. And I don't know how we define that.
Well, I think that willful misconduct, there's all kinds of misconduct that may or may not be illegal, right? There may or may not be a specific criminal statute that is paired to every concept of willful misconduct. But I think that I understand, and Representative Gall, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but I think that I understand that part of the concept behind all of this is that for our, frankly, for any elected official, for every single one of us in this room, but especially for our elected officials that are prosecutors, that by taking that position and taking the oath they take, they're held to a higher standard, and the community has the right to judge them against a higher standard than it does others. And when a prosecutor does things, whether it be willful misconduct in office or this concept of number 6, things that, and I understand that this is one of those things where we always want it to be in black and white, but there's a lot that's gray. This is one of those things that's very gray to me. But when you take that office, you volunteer to be held to a higher standard, and the consequence of that is that when you fall short of that standard, then the community loses faith in what you're upheld to do. And I think that's the concept behind this entire movement of this piece of legislation. And, look, I don't want to rehash what we talked about at the last hearing. There has been, an unusual trend in the last couple of years of things that we've seen that it's not political. It's been conduct that has nothing to do with politics or political affiliation. But it has shaken people's faith in our judicial system and in the prosecution system. And I think that we owe it to Georgians to have to set the bar, frankly, extremely high here. And I know that there are people in certain counties that have that their faith in this has just been shaken, and that they may never have the same faith in the judicial system that they did before. And I think that part of what we're tasked with, and I get it. Well, I know I very much appreciate our friends that are in the room here, that are, and I understand that the bar is moving on something, but I don't think that doesn't preclude us. I hope that the bar does do something, and I hope they do something meaningful, but I don't think that precludes us from our duty. The Constitution has a provision that allows us to be able to remove a district attorney. We are acting within our constitutional means in doing this. And so I think that it is prudent for the General Assembly to set this bar, this high bar for elected prosecutors that we expect, because living to that high bar is how we keep the confidence of our community and our citizens believing that the person that's sitting in that office is somebody that's trustworthy, that I can trust and is going to do the right thing when nobody's looking. And these may seem ambiguous, but I think it's one of those cases where when you see it, and when something has happened that compromises that integrity, then I think that it's this commission's job. The job of this commission is not going to be to rubber stamp every complaint that comes before it and remove DAs from office. I think it would be the opposite. The job of this commission is going to be to investigate and truly determine what needs to happen, reprimand versus what it may be, whatever the range of options may be. But I think that's and so I think that having it have a little bit of ambiguity is what will make it work, as opposed to, if you do this, then you've qualified to be reviewed by this commission. Well, then here's a list of things that I just need to make sure I don't do. but I can do these things, and I steer clear of the potential review of this. I think it defeats the purpose. And I say that as a person, I think we all want to know, tell me what I can and can't do, but sometimes it's best left as I'm not the one that gets to decide that. Did Representative McLaren?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I have a handful of small things to chat about. First, Representative, thank you. Still think that this is a good idea in principle. Really appreciate you including subsection H with the relevant standards from other jurisdictions. I mean, my understanding is that every single one of, unless I'm mistaken, every single one of the new standards that you've put in for discipline is borrowed from some sort of either, I mean, I know North Carolina, but I think those rules themselves are derivative of model rules that if you just Google some of this language, you find it in other states, Arizona, Delaware, et cetera. So I think that the subsection H it appears that it would keep us in line with model rules pertaining to judicial misconduct, which I think, as I've expressed before, track pretty well with what we expect in terms of conduct from DAs and solicitors. One of the questions I've got, this is maybe just a cleanup thing on the last page. It seems like the bill does a really good job of distinguishing between incapacity and discipline issues throughout the bill. Like I can see several references where I could go find lines if you needed to, where you say incapacity or discipline. So I was just wondering if we don't want to, I myself apparently can't turn to the last page. Right, line 208, it says the authority of the commission shall be limited to discipline regarding conduct. I was wondering if you wanted to say incapacity and discipline in keeping with the bill's segregation of those issues. And also, because I guess if you read the whole statute in tandem, which is what courts would have to do, I mean, it creates maybe a little bit of a rut if there's a formal statement that the commission doesn't have authority on incapacity, even though that's inconsistent with obviously the more specific terms.
And I think the Supreme Court can remove already for incapacity. I'm not opposed to that if that's will the committee. I don't really, because we do talk about that other places. But
yep, I just want to make sure that was clean. And then the next set of issues I want to raise is I see that you've gone through for each of the appointments and you've staggered the terms. It appears as widely as possible. In some cases, 1 year, in some cases, 3-year initial terms. I don't know that I saw many that were appointed for an initial term of 2 years. Was there a reason for that? Because I see 1, 3, and 4 a lot.
No, I asked the legislative council to stagger it, and
that's what they did. Okay. Yeah, because I wonder if it's a little awkward, for example, and I don't know if this is something the committee wants to think about, but this commission's supposed to start in July of 2022. So a 4-year term, let's say the governor, I'm not trying to play politics, but if the governor were to change, then the governor would be getting an appointment that lasts for 4 years, pretty much overlapping exactly onto a successor's term. And so I just wonder if the timing of elections, if there's some thought that might go into, maybe staggering on the midterm and doing some of these for 2-year terms instead of 1 and 3. I haven't thought it out very carefully because I'm just now looking at this for the first time, but that was something I wanted to raise. And then the very last thing, which I've discussed with the chairman of the whole committee, is, we discussed at the initial meeting this idea of trust, and when you make review of DA or solicitor conduct subject to this political process, is there a risk of politicization? Right, is kind of the big elephant in the room on this bill in general. As I've expressed to the chairman, I actually don't just see this in terms of Republican or Democratic, right? I also see it in terms of prosecutorial sensibilities vis-a-vis, defense-oriented sensibilities. The idea that there are lots of stakeholders in the criminal legal system, and so it would be good to have multiple perspectives. And I so much appreciate. I think the intent, I don't want to speak for the author, was to bring the prosecutorial experience requirement out so that the pool of attorneys who could serve on the commission is larger, and so there would be more diversity potentially in the choices. Would you be open to putting in 1 or 2 requirements regarding who or what type of attorney? Like, for example, I know that I would be completely comfortable with having one attorney slot be required to have prosecutorial experience if maybe another attorney slot was required to have defense experience, right? So that there's a well-rounded perspective from multiple angles. Is that something that you would be amenable to? Have you discussed that?
Let me say this too. I mean, before that question is answered, I think that what would be prudent also is to think if there was a regulation of, defense attorneys or public defenders, would we want a district attorney? Would the counter argument would be, would you want a prosecutor on that? And I'm not saying that I know the answer, and I'm not suggesting an answer, but I think that that is something that would be, the criminal justice system straight up adversarial by design. It just is. And that's part of what makes it a beautiful thing. And what's great, what the wonderful part of it is people like Representative Bodie and I can walk out of a courtroom and have just gone at each other's throats on something and then talk about our wife and kids. But it's a very adversarial system. It's a very confrontational system. And it's always been that way, and it's going to always be that way. That's it. That's how it is. That's how it's designed, really. And so with that, I think that we really would need to look at that suggestion kind of in light of that. There is a degree when you appoint people on commissions, you just can't control what's really in their heart and what they really want to do and what their real motivations are. Just like you got a juror that will lie to the lawyers so that they can get on the jury and implement their agenda. Happens every day, right? And, the members of this commission obviously would need to take their job very seriously with this, but I think that we have to really kind of make some considerations with that. And again, I'm not suggesting one way or the other. That's just the red flag that went off in my mind. Representative Gullett, did you have anything in regards to that?
It was discussed pretty handily. I think actually we'd probably want to amend it to make it just a regular attorney on all of them with 10 years experience and an experienced attorney versus, versus having what we have in there. So that there's the most choices, for whoever's choosing this to choose it. So it was discussion about it. I think at the end of the day, this is kind of where we settled at. And
let me ask you this. Why on line 67, why do you want to remove the practicing attorney with at least 5 years of experience as a prosecutor from one of the appointments? I mean, I think that in some ways that is a healthy perspective, have somebody that once upon a time did that job, but now doesn't do it anymore. And there's a little bit of, there's some wisdom that could come with that. And as far as being able to look at things through objectively, why is why do you, my understanding is you intend to amend to strike that. Why is that?
Mr. Chair, let me jump in there. There was discussion about this, and I don't think anybody is debating whether or not having a experienced prosecutor on this committee is wise. I believe the chair's discernment is correct, but the limiting factor sometimes makes it hard when making appointments in these areas. And so the conversation was had to say that we need to leave it to the discretion of the appointors to make sure they're going, give them the discretion to allow them to make the right decision. I don't think there are any one of these appointors are gonna put somebody in there that basically has no expertise in this area of law. So it was just from a perspective of allowing for a more broad pool of appointees. That's the decision. And taking into consideration what Representative McLaurin was talking about versus it seems as though we've initially started making these appointments from a prosecutorial standpoint. Let's just make them practicing attorneys and let the appointor decide based on the makeup of the board at the time, or in the initial appointment, what they feel is best for the oversight of these prosecutors.
Okay. Representative Bodie.
Mr. Chair, and thank you for indulging me. And I don't want to beat a dead horse. It just keeps coming back to me, line 149 and 150. And I'm not going to politicize it because we talked about the political side of it last time. But I do want to bring into play the whole second guessing a prosecutor's decision. And you can think about if a prosecutor decided to present a case to a grand jury or not present a case to a grand jury, or they decided to investigate a case or not investigate a case, I don't want that to be some type of, the committee can say, well, they didn't pursue the administration of justice because they failed to indict the case or present the case to the grand jury, or vice versa. I just don't want Section 6 to be a Monday morning quarterback second guessing the decision of an elected prosecutor, no matter Democrat or Republican. Because you, Mr. Chair, respectfully, when you were assistant DA, you was pretty damn good. So I don't want this to come up and say, well, Burt Reeves, he should indict this case, and he didn't. And so therefore, I don't think he's administrating justice properly.
And that's an interesting point that you bring up. And I think that, if there's a way to, if there's language that, I don't think that would be, that's not your intention with the bill, is it, Representative Gullett?
No, it's not. This is model language. I think we all talked about, hey, we didn't want what we had. This is what is used elsewhere, is vetted elsewhere. Burt, as an ADA, would never be before this committee. Is actually on, or this commission is only for elected district attorneys and elected solicitors. And I don't think that's taken away from what your point is, but that's the reality. As an ADA, if he didn't indict the case, then he wouldn't be eligible for this commission.
But I think Representative Bodie's point is the same, though, that whether it was me or whether it was an assistant DA or whether it was an elected, ultimately the buck stops with the elected DA. And if a case wasn't indicted and it caused, and this happens all the time where, district attorneys have to make hard decisions. So do solicitor generals, they make hard decisions. They have access to information that nobody else does, and they have to make the best decision in the administration of justice. And the kind of Monday morning quarterbacking that comes to those hard decisions comes with the territory. That's part of the job. And every single one of them will tell you they've got thick skin, and they that's part of their job. But I think what Representative Bodie is saying is that this type of that part of the job shouldn't subject them to review or action by this commission. And I don't disagree with that. I think that, and, part of, and so if there is language that can get us, that can clarify that, that's one thing. I think on the other hand, it would be hard for me to imagine that the makeup of this commission would come to a place where that would be how they would govern. And I realize anything's possible, and our job is to account for all scenarios, those that are likely and those that are unlikely. But I do consider it very unlikely that the makeup of this commission, especially looking at kind of some of the experiences, you're talking about people that have been in positions that understand, because they've lived and they currently are living the roles where, they understand that these kind of decisions and what elected prosecutors have to decide on. And so my hope would be that those kind of things wouldn't be the basis of action. Anything can be the basis of a complaint, but this commission's job is going to be to separate the frivolous complaints from the ones that need to be addressed. And again, my hope and my expectation would be that this committee or this commission would have to act rarely, that probably the majority of complaints that would be submitted to the executive director would be frivolous complaints based on, sour grapes on something, they were prosecuted or their cousin was prosecuted or whatever it may be, and would probably never be considered even for the investigative panel. But I think that what we're doing is we're leaving it to this commission based upon approval by the Supreme Court to decide how they'll handle those things. And I think that, but and I don't know that we can come up with language right now today. And my intention, if it's the will of this committee, my intention is to move this bill to full committee. And if there is language that can perfect that, then that's something that can be considered in the interim. Because I do understand what you're saying, and I do understand the criticism that elected prosecutors face, and it's real. Did you want to talk again? Okay.
And Mr. Chair, you're absolutely correct. What I don't want to do is put a chilling effect on our prosecutors and the decision making that they have to do day in and day out on big cases, high profile cases, victim oriented cases that we just don't. I mean, it's enough that comes along with the job. I mean, I sit on the side of the criminal defense attorney, but I work very closely with prosecutors, and I know what they go through, and I know what I go through as a criminal defense lawyer. And we just don't need to put one extra thing on our elected prosecutors and solicitors.
Well,
we could chill the effect of what they might say. I don't know what the committee may do if I don't do this, or if I do this, I don't know how the committee would react to my actions or anything.
The concept of the accountability that this commission would potentially be able to impose, would that affect their decision makings? And I hope, what my hope is, and I think what every single one of our hopes are, and I think that for the most part we have this in Georgia. I think our DAs and our solicitors, when they make these very, very big decisions, they weigh on them very heavily, and I think that they ultimately focus on doing what's right. I mean, I think about I think it was the DA down in Milledgeville 10 years ago that had the Ben Roethlisberger case. And I mean, you talk about courage to review the case and review the facts and decide it's not a case that could be prosecuted, and the scrutiny that he faced in that. But knowing what I know about the law and knowing what I know about, what I knew about the facts in that case, I believe he made the right decision, and it was a tough decision. And I believe that our DAs and our solicitors across the state typically, mostly do a very good job of that. But I agree, I wouldn't want the accountability that this is designed to bring is different from second guessing decisions that they have to make. And I don't think that this is intended to serve as that. And if there's a way to perfect that language in there on that, then I think that's something that we should look at. Yeah. I'm going to, McLaurin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Candidly, I'm probably prepared to support the bill. I mean, I feel close to that, and the chairman and I have talked about it. I think in the interest of good faith negotiation, it might help, and I can work with my colleague on this, if maybe we put in some sort of a bar that says, no inquiry shall be entertained on the basis of, and then sort of specify what that is. Because my guess is there might be a way to clarify maybe just one or two aspects of these standards. And because one thing I think we definitely don't want, which is obvious, is we don't want a one-off charging decision to be the basis for an allegation of anything habitual or persistent. I think that's a baseline we want to start with. And we might even want to go even one step further by saying, misconduct cannot be alleged based on a charging decision alone, absent some sort of showing that there's a personal interest or bias. That is not a valid type of consideration for a charging decision that was at issue. So in some ways you could maybe make it almost like a heightened pleading standard, not to change the substantive standards in any way, but just
you're using a bunch of civil words now.
But just to make sure that anybody who alleges a complaint, or for the commission to entertain a complaint, that there's some sort of heightened pleading to basically show it's not just that theoretically there could have been an improper motive here, but here's our actual evidence that we already have of it. And that might solve some of our trust issues, frankly. Because I mean, it's almost, let me go full civil, like the Twombly-Iqbal stuff, right? In federal court, heightened pleading standards, that theoretically does not change substantive rights. It is a procedural way to manage the docket of the court. And so I think it might improve trust for prosecutors if we
No
adopt a
offense to
similar model.
anybody in the room, but he's now on a plane up here, y'all. So,
but you see the point, and so that maybe could resolve some of our trust issues while not changing any of the substantive standards you guys are trying to impose.
so we're not going to be able to write these out right now and be able to amend this bill on those. But I think that if that effort can, do you want to?
Real quick,
Please,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair.
Chairman.
I mean, the intention of this bill is to allow this commission to promulgate the substantive standards that for discipline. So, if you will, these are guideposts, and this commission is going to set, like Representative McLaurin said, if we have one instance out of 1,600 that didn't get prosecuted, then the commission will use its discretion to assure that that is not going to be what we're capturing here. We're going to capture the 1,500 cases that weren't prosecuted just by abdicating their duty. That's what we're after here. We're not after the one-offs, like you said. I mean, we're after the folks that are habitual.
And I think that something else that remember that the final say, the commission will have a year from April of 2022. So this is really down the road. They'll have a year from 2022 to promulgate their rules and regs. But we got to remember that, our Supreme Court ultimately is the one that puts the stamp of approval on what they do. And we have a very attentive Supreme Court right now. There is no dialing in of anything that's going on there. And I am very proud of that. And I appreciate that. And I believe wholeheartedly that if this passes and when the time comes, that they will look at this with very careful and they'll scrutinize it to make sure that, whatever their degree is of approval or disapproval, I believe that their voice will be heard in that. And, there's no reason for me to think that 2 years from now, our Supreme Court is going to change the way that they are engaged in things like this, that they're asked to be engaged on. And I would expect that this is a job that they will take very seriously in what their role is in being the final voice of approval on how this commission is actually really going to operate. And I think that it's also worthwhile to say that the Supreme Court has a lot of experience because they're called on as far as disbarments go and things like that. Attorney conduct and misconduct is something that is in their wheelhouse that they review consistently. So this is not a foreign concept to them, and I think it's something that they will be able to give guidance on and making sure that we land in the right place, or that the commission lands in the right place if the commission becomes a reality. Does anybody have any other? I want to hear from our speakers. Ms. Wallace, what is your microphone number? Okay. And then Ms. Grice, what is your 10? I'm just going to turn both of your microphones on. And Ms. Wallace, y'all feel free to, I understand the concerns y'all have. And so, feel free and let's talk through this.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you.
Go ahead and pull that closer. I think you're going to need to be, closer to it for us to hear. Yeah, that
Okay.
should work. Same thing, Ms. Grice. I'd pull that thing pretty close to you when the time comes.
Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you. First and foremost, my name is Shannon Wallace. I'm the district attorney in the Blue Ridge Circuit, which is Cherokee County. I'm also the president of the District Attorneys Association. So most of what I'm speaking to you today is on behalf of the association. Just so you know, since your last subcommittee meeting, the association met. We actually met last Friday, and we discussed several pieces of legislation, but House Bill 411 being one that there was a lot of discussion around. So I know it's been a long day for you guys, and I'm going to quickly move through this. But first and foremost, just so this committee knows, the district attorneys are not opposed to oversight. The position that the association is in is that we believe that the oversight commission, we do not believe that the commission is necessary to achieve the goals that the legislature has stated. That, there have been situations that we all are aware of and that the district attorneys as a whole are embarrassed about. And we first and foremost recognize that issue. And that was the main reason why our association, even though our association can't do anything to regulate another district attorney, we recognize that it was an issue. So that was our main reason in trying to strengthen the state bar rules, specifically 3.8. The position of the association is that while we do not feel the commission is necessary to achieve the goals, we want to work with you to make sure that there is a bill that's an appropriate bill that doesn't have unintended consequences, that reaches your goals, but at the same time takes into consideration our concerns with how it's currently drafted. So that being said, some of the concerns that we have, and I've listened and tried to take notes as I would in a trial. I will say I'm a little bit of a fish out of water here, but some of the concerns that the association has stem mainly at this point in the way the substitute bill is drafted in the composition. And while I respect what has been said as far as opening up the pool for having more people to appoint to this position, I do believe it's important that it not be forgotten that the role of a prosecutor and the duties of a prosecutor are things that you can't really understand until you've walked in those shoes. And Chairman, I know you understand because you've been an assistant district attorney. I've been an assistant district attorney, a defense attorney, and now the elected district attorney. And I can say, had I not been an assistant district attorney, my views would be very different as to what I might consider willful misconduct. And that's why it is extremely important for the composition of the commission, for the lawyers involved to actually have experience. One of the things that we actually discuss as an association is that actually having an elected solicitor who's currently in the role, an elected district attorney who's currently in the role, but also the experience as a prosecutor, that at least one of those be experienced as an elected prosecutor. And while I understand the concerns as you narrow your pool when you look to electeds, as you know, Chairman, there are many people who have served in the role as a prosecutor who have moved on and are now defense attorneys or are now practicing other types of law. One of the main concerns in, frankly, the bar right now is the state disciplinary bar. There are no requirements that there be any prosecutors in that process. And that's a concern because when you have someone who, with all due respect to my colleagues in transactional work, but if you have a transactional lawyer that has never been out on a crime scene and has never assisted law enforcement with search warrants and has never prosecuted a case or been in the courtroom and doing the things that prosecutors do every day, it is very difficult for that individual to totally comprehend what prosecutors go through. And for that reason, the composition is even more important in making sure that we're dealing with individuals who are sitting in judgment and potentially taking, the job away from an elected district attorney, that they truly understand what a district attorney does and what a solicitor general, what we do. Because if you don't have a great comprehension of that, then little things that the district attorney may do might be magnified to an attorney who's never practiced as a prosecutor. So that's our main concern as the bill is written with the composition of the
And I think I share that with you too. I mean, I understand the difference, and that is something that I share that concern too.
I understand the pool, and while that is a valid concern, I do believe that there are a significant number of individuals who have prosecutorial experience. Even if you looked at changing from 5 to lowering that to 3, anything helps. But I do believe that that is a huge problem with not having a requirement that this 5-panel investigative commission have prosecutorial experience. The next issue, and I will say,
Before you go on,
yes,
thank you for your testimony. This is very helpful. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that the commission could stand to have a defense perspective on the commission?
I don't believe there's a problem in having a defense perspective. And frankly, I believe what you will find are most people who are no longer prosecutors are defense attorneys. And so I think you can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone for the most part in just making sure that that defense attorney also has prosecutorial experience. And I will say, from having been a defense attorney, your roles are a lot different. The state has the burden, and there are many things that as a defense attorney, you don't necessarily consider until you're walking in the shoes of a prosecutor. And that's the same thing with respect to, I was an assistant for a long time before I became the elected, and I had really honestly no idea what I was getting myself into when I actually took over the role as the elected district attorney, which again brings me back to why we said having elected district attorneys, that knowing that I'm responsible for every action of my ADA and knowing how to handle that to make sure that they don't do something that's not only going to make them have a bar, issue, but also is going to make me lose my job above and beyond getting voted out of office, which is already a huge concern, above and beyond even being potentially charged with a crime. So there are lots of concerns, but making sure the composition is fixed is huge in getting to the other goals that I know the legislature and the district attorneys are wanting. The 8 specific rules, did I answer your question?
Yes,
Chairman?
ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The 8 specific grounds for removal. I know that my colleague, Brad Rigby, was concerned about the vagueness of the 3 rules that were in the previous bill. And I can appreciate Representative Gullett has spent a lot of time in crafting and looking at other states and finding what is removal, appropriate for removal in North Carolina. However, the concern is now we have 8 things here. And while some of them are very common sense, some of them are not necessarily, and it really is. The rules in this need to be made by this commission, who are made up of the prosecutors who understand what it is that the rules should be. So keeping that number, recognizing that we want to put something in here for general principles, general guidelines, keeping that number down is going to be better. I use the example of, I'm not sure which number habitual intemperance is. I know that is in the language with the JQC. The concern is, what does that really mean? Am I going to have a complaint filed against me as the elected district attorney because a defendant claims that I habitually refuse to reduce child abuse cases, and that's not showing moderation, and therefore I should be removed from office? We just want to make sure that whatever rules we have, that the unintended consequences are not such that you're removing good prosecutors doing their job from office. And I believe Representative Bodie stated the same thing, is just making sure that what we put in these rules are things that good prosecutors can live by and still do their job and not have to worry every minute that you're going to be making a mistake that's going to allow you to be removed, even though it's a mistake that your voters voted you in for. Me taking a position that I do not reduce child crimes or that I'm tough on child crimes is what keeps me being elected in my circuit. And we want to make sure that that's also not a ground for somebody to remove me. And
yeah, and I don't think that anybody, I don't think that I can tell you for certain that the intention of this is not for that result. And the question is, you know, have we set the words on the paper up such to achieve that? And I know that Representative McLaurin was talking a few moments ago about potentially further qualifying some of these things by removing certain concepts like charging decisions and things like that. And perhaps, look, we're not going to figure this out today. This is going to have to be something over the next 48 hours. That's, you know, whenever it is that full committee is going to meet, that's up to the chairman. But, and, you know, if this passes this committee and it passes the House, then it will, you know, we're getting to that point where I get the sense that this is going to move, and we're going to get to a point where whatever it is how it's going to move, and it's either going to pass or it's not going to pass. And if it passes and it goes over to the Senate, then these issues get to be addressed, you know, in front of a whole new group of people. And y'all know how this works, but perhaps something along the lines of what Representative McLaurin was talking about could be implemented into this to kind of create those boundaries, you know. And I struggle. I'm sitting here and my brain is literally struggling with trying to think out loud. Is it best for this to say that the commission promulgates and decides, or is it best for us to give some guidance and then they go from there? On one hand, at least we, in this collaborative sense right now, can all engage on these things and have a certain level of control over that, versus if the commission decides to do something that's completely out in left field, that from what the legislative intent of this was, and I'm not sure where that gets us. So I am struggling with kind of, you know, those two thoughts. But I think that right now, I think that what I would really like to most consider is putting some parameters around it, but possibly creating some exclusion type language that ensures that we don't get in.
I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, Mr. Chair. I think we had only 3 in there, and it was viewed as being too vague and too broad. So we're trying to tighten this language up. Now, I'm committed to, and I believe the chair is also committed to, we would like to move this bill. I'd like you guys, the DAs, to be part of that process. If you could come to us in the next 48 hours and help us with this language, I'd certainly appreciate it. I think the committee would appreciate it. The chair would appreciate it. And let's get us a good piece of a work product out of here.
I do want to, I know the hour's late, and frankly, I'm sitting here making alternative childcare pickups because I can't get to my child now. So, but that's okay. That's what happens. But Ms. Grice, why don't you, I do want to give you the opportunity to talk with us as well.
Well, certainly. And I would.
You got to pull your microphone
okay,
up a lot
sorry.
closer.
So sorry. Actually, I think it doesn't want to, there we go. And good afternoon. I'm the Solicitor General in Bibb County. So, and I'm actually the Vice Chair of Prosecuting Attorneys Council and have served as past president of Solicitor Generals Association. And we had as Ms. Wallace said, had a meeting on Friday as a joint group. And so a lot of what she is saying, pretty much everything she is saying, absolutely applies to us in the Solicitors Association, Solicitor Generals Association as well. A couple of things, and I think we have, I'm gonna make sure. I think actually you made all your points. I'm trying to check. We both have the same list. But what I was going to say is that I too would want us to tighten up this requirement, you know, this idea that no inquiry should be entertained unless XYZ PDQ. And the reason for that is that I am concerned we are already from a Solicitor General's Association, we tend to be in offices with very small budgets, not a lot of assistance, and doing a huge caseload.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be concerned, and I think my colleagues would be concerned, that they are put in a position where they have to answer to complaints that are being sent up to this commission. And again, so maybe it is that this, you know, eliminating language, this limiting language would help. But I mean, okay, so if it goes up and is filed with the executive director of the commission, does that mean that we are going to have to, or we're going to have to submit our files, our prosecutorial files, so that we can be investigated? That's a lot of manpower, and we're already stretched very thin. I'm fortunate. I've got 6 assistant solicitors, but I've also got a pretty big county. But you've got small jurisdictions like Milledgeville or something like that, where it's just them, or it may be them and a part-time prosecutor handling a large caseload. So that is something that I really would encourage that limiting language, because that is a true concern of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And if you create something, whereas right now, a defense attorney or a victim or a defendant would know better than to go up to the state bar with something so frivolous, there's going to be a lot of testing of the waters, especially until we can get this, get Supreme Court opinions in and that type of thing. And so that is probably my chief concern. I'm there is a separation of powers. Solicitors generals are not constitutional officers. We're created by local legislation. And so it's a little bit of a different animal, even though it's not, because we're still having to make those same hard decisions. We pretty much, we make defendants angry. We make victims angry. We make a lot of people angry, but we know, because I've been prosecuting coming up on 27 years. As far as our ethical duties as prosecutors, that is like hammered into us from the get-go. We understand, those people who have come up in prosecution understand very well what our requirements are, and that we do have special duties. And so I applaud.
Fundamentally, just about every other lawyer's duty is to their client, to zealously advocate for the client, and the prosecutor's duty is for the truth and justice. And that is a totally different thing than what most lawyers kind of wrap their mind around. It's not a client thing.
No, and it is. I really am in favor of straight through 3.8, and I think we all are. But again, we're here at the table with you. We will work with you to help get good language. But I think my chief concern would be frivolous claims against us. And does this include our assistant solicitors and every decision that they make? Because I can tell you, I am not overseeing the individual assistant solicitor decisions. I give them the tools, and I trust them to do their jobs. I have to.
That's right. And again, I don't think that that's the intention of this effort, but yet number 7 does address. It's knowingly authorizing your assistance. And so let me do this. In the interest of time, I believe that over the next 48 hours, I think that some of the issues that you would like to see addressed, I think we're going to be able to work some of that in. I think that some of this, if this passes the House, is probably going to need to be taken up in the Senate, and that's how the process works. We have a deadline on Monday, and this, we can't have a committee meeting on Monday. So, there's going to come a point where the line's going to be drawn, and what we've been able to do, what we've been able to do, we've been able to do. And if the bill passes and it lives and it goes to the Senate, then we will, then the issue, the issues can be discussed over there. What I'm going to do is ask for a motion right now, and then I have a couple of amendments based on some of the discussion. So there's a motion to pass. Is there a second? Okay. So there's a motion to second. I would like to. I'd like to propose an amendment on line 141 to add, after district attorney, to add or solicitor general to line 141. So it would read, the following shall be grounds for discipline of a district attorney or solicitor general, or for his or her removal or involuntary retirement from office. I assume that was just inadvertently left out.
Yeah.
That's Reeves amendment number 1. Can I get a motion on my amendment? Is there a second? Okay. Is there any objection to Reeves amendment 1? Seeing none, I would like to make Reeves amendment 2 at the suggestion of Representative McLaurin to insert the word in line 208. Before the word discipline, insert the two words incapacity. Would it be and discipline or discipline? The authority of the commission shall be limited to incapacity and discipline regarding the conduct, incapacity or discipline. I think or is better. Okay, so in front of the word discipline on line 208, I moved to insert incapacity or, so that it's now, this is clarifying to make it consistent with the rest of the bill, which other parts of the bill deal with incapacity, that it's incapacity and or discipline.
Move to pass.
Is there a second, or all right, anybody object to that amendment? Does anybody else have any amendments? Okay, seeing none, then we have a motion do pass in a second, LC 413060S as amended by committee. All those in favor vote by saying aye. All opposed? Okay, the ayes have it, and this bill will move on to full committee, and we will work and see what we can come up with to get us to a better place. Full committee will meet at 5:30. Full committee will meet at 5:30. Right here. Please don't leave. What's our quorum? Nobody can leave. All right. Lock the doors. See y'all in a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.